Okay, so in this nugget, we're going to talk a little bit about reading books. And you don't have to be the perfect student to read a lot of books. I personally had to force myself into the habit of reading nonfiction books. And I did it because when I grew up, I was poor and came from a broken family, and I wanted to be successful. I really didn't work hard in high school, and I didn't learn a lot there either. So after high school, I flunked out of college in the first semester. And I decided to get into sales because it was the only potentially high-paying job that you could have without an education. Fortunately, somehow I started reading some books when I started my sales career. I don't know if it was just 2 or 3 books a year, but I started studying sales and success. And one book that really made a big impact on me was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Dr. Stephen Covey. This is the first time I thought, holy shit, there's actually a formula to be successful and I can do it. Part of the formula was to sharpen the saw and study a lot and read a lot of books about your profession. So I started reading a lot of books, and I talk about that quite a bit. The reason I talk about it so much is because it's helped me achieve some of the goals that I set out for myself in my life. I probably wouldn't have achieved any of these goals if it wasn't for all the books that I read. And for that reason, I love to see other people get into the habit of reading so that they can achieve their own goals. If your goal is to make money or be a great athlete or coach or be the best mom or be a phenomenal artist, you need to read about and study people who made a bunch of money or were the top athletes and coaches in their field or the best moms on the planet or the top artists in the world. But even though I've read a lot of books, I'm not a very good reader. You see, the other side of the coin is I started plenty of books and never got them finished. And I mean a lot of books. I also buy tons of books that I intend to read and just somehow never get to them. I tell myself all the time that I'm going to keep track of all the books that I read, and I don't. Every few years, I try to remember the books that I read, and I make notes like this year, and I can't seem to remember all of them because I don't keep track. I also always plan to reread certain books and sit down with a notepad and take good notes, and I almost never do that either. I also hardly ever do the questions or homework or the worksheets or quizzes that are at the end of the chapters of each book. I always dream about reading more books than I do, and sometimes I feel guilty that I'm not reading enough. I could tell you more things as to why I'm such a crappy reader, but I think you get the point. You may have experienced some of those things yourself. What I do talk about all the time, though, is how much I do read. I always talk about the things that I'm reading and how much I enjoy reading. I don't talk about the bad things. That doesn't mean that they're not happening. I talk about these things to reinforce my own brain that that's who I am and what I do. I'm a reader. I would never say something like, I hate reading, or regularly talk about all the ways that I fail at being a good reader. That would only strengthen those types of neural patterns in my brain. And it's true, I am always constantly reading. It just doesn't go as I always envision it going. But I do have habits in place that allow me to get a fair amount of reading done. For example, I have books everywhere, and I mean everywhere, in all of my bedrooms, in my bathrooms, in all of my offices, in every employee's office, in our break rooms, and even my kids' rooms. Basically, every room probably has a book or a bunch of books in it. I also always take a book with me wherever I go. If it's on a business trip or a vacation, I always pack a book. There's always one in my vehicle too, even if I don't get to reading them while I'm on vacation or those business trips. So I always have an opportunity to get some regular reading in. And that doesn't even count Audible. Most days I take the time to listen to Audible or read a few pages, like for example, on the drive to work or sitting on the toilet. It could be taking a shower or a bath, and that's a great place to have Audible. Even when I hop into bed, I try to catch a few pages. There are plenty of opportunities to get 10 to 15 minutes of reading in. I may go a few days or at most a week without reading anything, but most days I get a little bit in. If I'm reading something that I'm really getting into, sometimes I'll go on stretches where I'll read for an hour or two a day for several days in a row. And a lot of times on several day business trips or vacations, I make sure to knock out at least one book because of all of the downtime, like when you're on airplanes. And I'm using Audible for a ton of this because it's so convenient. A lot of times you'll get a really good narrator, which makes the book a lot better on Audible. The point I'm trying to get at is even though I fail all the time at being a good, faithful reader, I have set up my environment and habits so that I'm always getting a lot of information in from good books, a constant dose, if you will. I may not take good notes. I may not finish every book I start. I don't remember everything I've read, and I don't read as much as I could. But keeping my focus on it has allowed me to read enough and hear certain things often enough until I start to see and understand some of the common themes or threads. They start to stick. Maybe it's the repetition. Look, I'm not the smartest guy out there for sure because I've met those people and they are freaky smart and there are tons of them. But I do dump enough information constantly into my brain that I just start to get a good understanding of a lot of things. It reminds me of this great quote from General James Mattis, who's a total badass United States Marine Corps 4-star general. You should check him out if you aren't familiar with him. He said, "If you haven't read hundreds of books, you are functionally illiterate and you will be incompetent because your personal experiences alone aren't broad enough to sustain you." Boom. Think about that one. So my challenge to you is to do the same thing. Get yourself in the habit of reading or listening to books. Set up your environment to keep the constant dose of whatever it is you want to learn about coming into your brain. If your house is full of booze, you'll probably drink some booze. If there are no booze at your house, you probably won't drink any booze. If your house is full of books, you'll probably read some books. It's a lifestyle choice. So go have a great week and read a few pages.